Well, hey, we're here at Gunners Firearms with Maggie. Maggie, it's always so good to see you.
Hey, Mark. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, we had mentioned in past videos, we've talked about new gun buyers a lot.
Yes.
Over the last 2 years, probably. I couldn't even tell you how many times we've talked about it. But the biggest category, one of the biggest categories of new gun owners is women, specifically women who live alone.
Yep.
And what would you, if a woman came, woman, I live alone, I don't know anything about guns, what direction are you going to walk that person down? Because I know you don't typically say, well, here's the best gun for you, because you
have to make sure that you're playing to your customer's strengths. Like, what are they comfortable with? What calibers have they shot before? Where are they comfortable starting? How many safeties on a firearm they are comfortable with. A lot of the recommendations for first-time firearm owners are firearms that do not have external safeties. And someone that is just learning and would probably appreciate maybe an external safety on the gun. So that kind of puts a few of the main brands right out of there, but it does leave multitude of options for people that are still there. So we just had a lady come in with her friend, and these two girls were looking at firearms that she could use by herself, have to load it by herself, have to be able to unload it by herself, have to be able to chamber that first round in there. So the first thing we look at, we say, what do you want? And, they'll go through and they'll point to something first that catches their eye. Mm-hmm. That's where you always want to start.
As we all do, for the record.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it usually, pardon my reach, I go over here. So it usually is something like along the lines of this pretty stinking nifty Smith & Wesson Equalizer that came out. I mean, it looks like your run-of-the-mill semi-auto with a double stack magazine, and it's got that backstrap safety. It has ambidextrous thumb safeties on the back of it. It has high capacity, but they have to be able to rack the gun by themselves, and then they have to be able to operate everything. This lady had just had shoulder surgery, and so she is starting the recovery process, and she had about 6 more weeks to go, I believe, and she was still not at full strength, and she could not, even on previously loved firearms, and even on a Smith & Wesson Easy, which is supposed to be made for people to be easier to rack, and the Equalizer, which has the same features. She still was not able to do that. So being able to go to a store where you can get your hands on something and try it out to see if you can actually work it. So that put this category of guns straight out.
Well, okay, and actually, and we could talk about that later because I have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
But keep going.
So the next one up was Revolvers, because we're like, okay, so we have to make sure that she can get the slide rack, that she can chamber around in there. So the Revolvers were a little bit easier because you just push the button. I don't do this backwards. It's way easier when you don't do it backwards. But you push the little button forward on the Smith & Wessons and then pop your cylinder out just like that, and then load it and unload it with the little cylinder pin right there.
It's pretty easy. It's a good direction to go for a new gun owner. Any new gun owner.
Phenomenal. But once again, the thing that most people don't like about Revolvers, there are no external safeties. You can get around this on some of them. Modern Smith & Wessons do have that nifty little key lock that's right there, so you can lock it down, but you really don't want to be in the position where you're like,
let me get my tiny little key out.
Time out! Come back in 5 minutes. Let me find the key. Let's get this thing unlocked.
Let me ask you this. So if women that are looking at Revolver, let's say they go, okay, I like the Revolver. Let's talk about this. Now, are they more comfortable once they realize it's a double action first pull without an external safety? Because typically,
first-time gun
like, I'm an
owners.
external safety guy when it comes to things like a 1911, strike fire things, but a revolver,
So, first-time gun owners, we'll be absolutely honest here. First-time gun owners have no idea what the difference between striker fired, single action,
okay.
double action is, and they're like, "Hang on, what language are you speaking? Like, can you put this in something that I can I understand?" So then you go through and say, well, if you really need to, you can pull the hammer back like that, and then you are just doing the singular action of pulling the trigger right there. Double action would be if the hammer stays up, and then when you pull it all the way through, your hammer is going back as you are pulling until it reaches the point where it breaks, it clicks, and it...
Now, once they understand, would they feel more... Because it's hard. It would be all hard to find a revolver with an external safety on it. Other than the little key lock, which I would never recommend. It feels like that's a bad idea for a new gun owner to try to figure that piece out in an emergency situation.
That would be kind of miserable for any gun owner in an emergency situation. Not just first timers. This is across the board. Everybody. You do not want to be in that position. It really depends on the trigger pull on there. It is so easy to pull the trigger when it is single action. And as long as you can pull that hammer back, cock it, and then you can pull the trigger. But there are people out there, like people that have just done surgery or gone through surgery and do not have the strength that they have, or for whatever reason, they would not be able to pull the trigger on this. So sometimes revolvers aren't necessarily the answer either.
Sure. Well, my second oldest daughter, I had her try a revolver, and she couldn't pull the double action trigger. It was a little heavy, but I was surprised. I thought, she's going to love this gun. She couldn't even pull the trigger.
Yeah, it does get easier with practice and time. Unfortunately, most people don't want to sit there and practice firing or dry firing their firearm, which in some cases, like rimfire cartridges, your 22s, 22 Magnums, the 17s, anything that has not a primer right there in the center, a center fire cartridge, those you really don't want to practice dry firing unless you have some sort of dummy rounds inside there.
Well, now let me ask this. What would be your best advice for a woman living alone looking for her first gun?
Try everything. Try everything. Shop everywhere. Shop the little stores. Shop the big stores. Get your hands on everything. I can't tell you how many places girls will go to look at shoes. They don't go to just one place and buy that first pair that they see right off the rack. Oh no, it's like, let's go to this store. Let's go to this store. Let's go to another store. Let's try on 50 different pairs before I find the pair of shoes I want. Gun shopping should be the exact same thing. My wife gives it that correlation too. She said when I see you on the internet scrolling through guns, it's kind of like if I was just scrolling through black shoes. Yeah. They all just look the same. It does. It really does. They all look the same. I'm like, they're very different. What are you talking about? So your difference is in your brand. Your difference is in your type. Is it a revolver? Is it something that is semi-automatic like that, where it just fires as fast as your finger pulls the trigger? Technically, both of these are semi-automatic. This one is considered a pistol. This one is considered a revolver. But the features and the fit in your hand are what you are looking for.
And how well it carries on you, all sorts of things.
The fit in hand. I cannot tell you, I have drooled over guns online. Read all the spec sheets and this is it, the newest, latest, and greatest. It's gonna be the gun that I have to have. And then I get my hands on one and I'm so disappointed. It's just not what I had dreamed it would be. It's a great gun, but it would be a great gun for somebody else, not for me. So getting your hands on one, actually being able to test one would be rule number one. I mean, get your hands on the product that you're looking for, be able to see how it fits and finishes. And if there's a place that has a range that'll let you test fire it, bingo!
There you go.
You want to do that. You definitely want to do that. Once you are thoroughly pleased with everything in your hand that you've got here that you've been looking for, you really do need to make sure that you test it, because when it's not doing anything, unloaded, empty in your hand at a gun counter, that's one thing. But to be able to fire it and see how it feels when there's actual recoil involved, that is another thing entirely.
Story.
Yes.
I'm glad you said that, because there's been a lot of guns that I bought, and I love it. I take it home, I'm messing with it, and I go out and shoot it. I don't like it anymore. Yeah. There's also the worst guns for women living alone, too.
Yes.
And it's not, it's not like this gun is the worst gun for women, but there are definitely some bad ideas for women living alone. So, do you mind if I kind of talk through like what goes real, for women living alone, they're looking for that first gun. What are some bad scenarios that you got there? Oh gosh, the worst possible scenario that immediately comes to mind is the well-meaning family members and friends that bring you a firearm that you have no earthly idea how to operate it. Whether it's a shotgun, whether it's a rifle, whether it's a handgun, but they're like, here, I've brought this for you. This is how you load it. They spend like 2 or 3 minutes right there, going over it with you, and you're like, oh, thanks. This is great. This is fantastic. Okay, I'm never going to use it. So then it sits in the closet, or it sits under something in a safe somewhere, and they never take it out until that one time they might need to use it. They have no clue what they're doing with it. They've never practiced after that one, hey, here it is. I'm bringing you a firearm, and you're going to use this, and you should be able to do it without any practice. I hate that, because the worst possible thing that could happen is that if you're home and you don't know how to operate it, maybe the person that is invading your home does know how to operate it and takes it from you and holds you at gunpoint with your own gun. I'm not saying that's going to happen to everybody, but there are instances in which it has happened where people have been held at gunpoint with their own by their own guns that they have no clue how to use. So, or maybe they didn't even know was there because someone had dropped it off, or a relative that had passed away, a spouse that had passed away had left it there and they didn't know about it. Well, somebody else found it first before they did. So that is quite possibly the worst firearm scenario to have, and I sincerely hope that doesn't happen. I couldn't imagine how common that is too, that it's so incredibly common, because a lot of people will go out and buy guns for their loved one, for their mother or their daughter or their
sister,
their spouse,
their
or
aunt,
their sister, their girlfriend, that kind of thing, because they're living alone, they're by themselves, they don't want them you need to be protected. So here, take this gun. Or they'll make recommendations that you need. Don't listen to what that salesperson. You need this. This is the gun you want.
The worst particular gun, the one without a safety, the one that is always consistently and constantly recommended to first-time firearm owners. Buy a Glock.
Buy a Glock. You gotta have a Glock. Don't
buy
anything but a Glock.
Just put your blinders on. Don't look at anything unless it says Glock. This is what you want.
Now, we did a video on this, but what was the #1 returned handgun in the last 2 years?
Firearms without safeties. Glock.
But a lot of that was because of just... I guess what I hear, if I understand this correctly, what I'm hearing you saying is that the problem is that people are saying you want this thing, and then they don't have the opportunity to put the other thousands of options in their hand and say, well, what's best for me? Just because it's best for my brother Hank doesn't necessarily mean it's what's best for me.
I've got friends in military and law enforcement, and this is the only gun they recommend and the only gun they practice and train with. There's the key right there. They have practiced and they have trained with it. And I guarantee the first gun that was put into their hands was not a Glock. At some point, it probably was a rinky-dink little 22, either,
like most people.
a single action revolver, a rifle, something in a small caliber where you get used to the noise first and you don't have the kick of that recoil to it. And they almost always have a safety on it. When you are teaching a first-time firearm owner, what to do, or the first time anybody gets their hands on a gun, whether they own firearms or not, you're going to teach them ones that have safeties on it. And you go, okay, here's the safety, this is this, you go over all the features, here's how you load it, this is the trigger, do not touch the trigger until you are aligned with your target and you know what is behind that target. There's a lot of steps and rules first. Just like the first time that you get behind the wheel of a car, your instructor doesn't say, okay, we're hitting the interstate highway, get ready, we're going to merge into traffic.
Right, I'm glad you said that.
No.
You start off slow.
No,
parking lot maybe.
Yes.
An empty parking lot.
An empty parking lot or something like that, and you're like, okay, don't cross any of the yellow lines, practice stopping, practice starting. If you're in a manual transmission, practice on hills, so you use baby steps. You don't just go.
And guns like Glock, Glock was specifically made for the Austrian military trials. I mean, it was made for the Austrian, like he said, I'm going to make a gun for the Austrian military trials. So it's a fantastic firearm for the military. It's a fantastic firearm for the police. It's a fantastic firearm for an experienced concealed carrier. It's a terrible gun for a first-time gun owner, I believe.
It wouldn't be my very first option for a first-time firearm owner. Not especially if they have minimal to no experience handling firearms on a regular basis. I'm not talking like, hey, I go to the range once every year or once every 2 years with my family or my friends. I'm talking, you're going to need some serious range time, at least once a month.
What's the best advice you can give to a woman living alone that comes in and said, my uncle said all I want to look at is Glocks?
Go to the range, play with the Glock. Find a reputable range that will let you rent firearms and test fire them and try that Glock. Try it first. Have your uncle take you to the range. You may love it, and you may have enough experience with firearms that it's not going to be an issue for a gun that doesn't have any external safeties. Not saying that Glocks don't have safeties. They do have. They have internal safeties, but
it's just more about. It's the awareness of your trigger control. It's the awareness of reholstering. There's so many things that a new gun owner is just simply not aware of that you have to be aware of if you are the owner of a Glock or a gun like a Glock,
any semi-auto. But let's talk about the first thing that new firearm owners want to do when you say, okay, now let's see if you can pull the slide back. So the first thing they do is that their finger goes right through there all the way that they can. They squeeze that trigger. Oh, did you already hear that click?
So I was looking at that Equalizer because we broke that out in the last video, and it kind of reminds me, it's obviously like the Shield EZ, but it kind of reminds me, with the grip safety, the manual safety. I even question, if a person if it's not too complicated for a new gun owner.
If you want too complicated for a new firearm owner?
1911 maybe, but I could be wrong.
In
the end, it's really just try it. Like, make sure it's for you. Don't heed the advice. I mean, listen to advice.
Yeah.
But just know that you're a different person.
Yeah, you really are.
You're not that person.
My first advice for anyone new to guns, checking them out firsthand at the counter, keep the booger hook off the bang switch. So like, it amazes me how many people will grip the gun and then wrap their whole hand through there. And then when they pull that slide back, you hear that click. They've pulled the trigger when they're pulling the slide back. And there are so many things that can go wrong right there. If your hand slips off that slide, you've pulled the trigger, you have just destroyed whatever is beyond the end of that barrel. And if your hand is in the way, I mean...
I had a friend who shot himself in the hand that way. Yeah.
I've seen it happen firsthand. Yeah. Actually, I've seen it happen on cameras. So it just... So
really the worst thing that a woman living alone could do is really just kind of really not know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's really about the education, because I think the problem with saying to a person you only want this thing is now they're not going to become educated. They're not going to watch YouTube videos. They're not going to do the research. They're not going to go into the gun store multiple times or try multiple guns. They're going to be like, well, I want this thing, and then I'm just going to get it in the box, and I'm going to take it home, and I don't know how to use it. So it's really about
you've narrowed down the search
education.
The search pool so small that they don't realize that they have a broader pool to select from, and that they have more options than just that one thing.
Kind of like telling a woman, oh, you need some shoes for a night out. You don't want anything but Uggs. When there's clearly 100,000 shoes to choose from. Which is the analogy my wife always gives.
She's not wrong. She is so not wrong. You have options. Please explore them. But, oh my God.
They're so comfortable. You don't want anything but Uggs.
My motorcycle boots are way comfier than any pair of Uggs I've tried on. So I guess I'm not that target demographic there. Same for Glock. I don't think I am. I might be their target demographic, but maybe I just don't know it yet. Maybe I haven't had enough practice and experience to appreciate them the way they should be. I appreciate a lot.
I like them. They seem to be indestructible. They're very accurate. And
heard you did some.
The thing is that I just wouldn't recommend them to a new gun owner. Is the only thing.
I heard you were doing some torture testing on some Glocks, by the way.
At the bottom of the lake, freezing on a black ice. We're trying. It still runs great.
So, have you tried that with any other brand besides Glock?
I was going to go a different direction next.
I was going to say, have you? I
was going to try a Taurus. Yeah, what were you going to recommend?
Oh, I was going to say maybe try a 1911.
I thought about it. I thought about the 1911.
I mean, the problem with throwing something that's all metal into a lake is probably going to be rust issues. So I don't know how thoroughly you'd have to clean it.
I've cleaned the Glock pretty thoroughly so far. So.
Yeah, I've actually had people walk into the store going, well, I cleaned my Glock by putting it in the dishwasher. And I'm like, you are absolutely joking, right? Oh, no, I'll just slap that damn puppy in the dishwasher and away it goes. And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, if it works for you, but I would not recommend that to anyone else. And I do not have long-term studies on what that would do to your dishwasher or to your gun. These aren't dishes and plates. These weren't meant to go in a dishwasher. So
Maggie, gosh, thank you so much. We always appreciate you, and especially this particular topic because Laurel been asking me to do a video on this for quite a while, and I just said, well, I don't feel like I'm necessarily the right person to have this conversation. So I really appreciate you doing this. Being an experienced gun salesman and a woman. So we thank you for all your insight.
Hi, cool beans.
Yeah.
Glad I could help.
Awesome.
You are so welcome, and we'll see everybody next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.